These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. Ham the chimpanzee became the first great ape in space on January 31, 1961, riding the Mercury Redstone 2 mission. His suborbital flight lasted about 16 minutes, climbed over 250 kilometers. This leather mask from the 16th century city of Nuremberg was worn by a public official during formal ceremonies, its stitched panels turning a face into a calm, unreadable surface. London, 1st of May 1936. A workers' march moves through central streets with banners and a large sign that reads, "Stalin for World Peace." This rare moment shows how some in Britain publicly backed that message. Many people know the Iron Maiden as a grim relic from the Middle Ages, but historians say it was likely built in the 19th century for shows and cabinets of wonder. This museum photo from 1912 shows a spiked shell that fueled a legend more than real court use. Archive photo from 1922 shows 4 robed men with pointed hoods standing by a biplane in Virginia. Researchers note that such staged images were part of a publicity push by a secret society that used costumes, parades, and symbols to project power. 1938, state hospitals often kept thousands of people, and crowded wards like this were standard across the country. Stays could last years with little therapy, as routines valued order over comfort and personal choice. Portrait of a Maori man in 1870 with full tomoko, the face art that shows family lines, rank, and life story. 19th century studios often photographed moko as records of identity, and the practice has a strong revival in modern New Zealand. In 1897, a Belgian fair near Brussels displayed 267 people from Congo in staged village sets to promote the colony. 7 participants died during the event, while the show helped sell King Leopold II's Congo project to visitors. During the Mauna Ulu eruption of Kilauea in 1969, gas lifted a thin roof of lava into a near-perfect bubble about 20 meters tall before it broke. Such fountains sometimes rose hundreds of meters and helped build fresh land along Hawaii's coast. In 1951, United States soldiers at the Nevada test site joined Desert Rock training, watching a detonation about 5 kilometers away during Operation Buster Jangle. These drills put thousands of troops close to tests to measure battlefield effects and tactics. Rally in Moscow in 1991, where former patients of state psychiatric hospitals held a banner for Boris Yeltsin. Street support like this helped Yeltsin win the first presidential election in Russia in June 1991. This is the Kalaupapa settlement on Molokai in 1925, where people with Hansen's disease were sent by law to live apart from the islands. Hawaii kept that isolation rule from 1866 to 1969. In 1927, a cobbler named Smirnov posed with colossal leather boots made as a shop sign and parade prop. Giant showpieces like this drew crowds before neon, turning simple trades into street theater. Winter veranda beds show the open-air cure for tuberculosis, a method begun by physician Hermann Bremer in the 1850s and copied worldwide. Until antibiotics in the 1940s, rest, cold air, and sunlight were core treatment in alpine sanatoriums. In 1939 London, Britain issued over 30 million civilian gas masks, and designers styled coats and plaid suits to wear with them in daily life. Handbags gained special boxes, hoods hid straps, and drills turned safety gear into a street look. Colonial Saigon, circa 1924, ran tightly regulated districts where Vietnamese women were registered, inspected, and controlled under French police rules. Archives describe coercive contracts. In the Netherlands, endurance contests called paalzitten had people sit on tiny seats above water for hours or even days. This photo from 6 August 1971 shows entrants balanced on posts by a canal, chasing prizes for patience and local fame. In 1914 London, salons promoted electrification corsets that pulsed low-voltage current from dry cells to tone the bust and waist while promising better posture. Such electrotherapy beauty gear was widely advertised before strict medical rules. In 1918, an American hospital ward holds rows of influenza patients while nurses in masks move between beds. The pandemic infected about one-third of the world and is estimated to have killed up to 50 million people. A field wedding on the Western Front shows an officer and his bride wed between artillery as soldiers watch in silence. Russia sent an expeditionary corps to France in 1916, and rare vows like this offered a brief touch of home amid the guns. Germany fielded about 30,000 trained dogs in the First World War as messengers, sentries, and Red Cross searchers. They carried notes across trenches, hauled cable for field telephones, and found wounded at night, quiet partners who rarely made the records. During World War I, messenger dogs were trained by several armies, and German handlers even tested small chest cameras like this to record ground views during runs. The camera idea was short-lived, while the dogs kept carrying notes, wire. An 1865 portrait of Liliuokalani, who would become the last monarch of Hawaii and the composer of the song Aloha Oe. Her later push for a new constitution and calm leadership kept Hawaiian identity alive long after the throne ended. Berlin, 1926. A lecturer addresses a learned society with a bold claim that he is a visitor from Venus sent to study people. Such talks mixed new radio technology, space dreams, and spiritual clubs of the decade, blurring science with showmanship. The unfinished French battleship Jean Bart fought at Casablanca on 8 November 1942 during Operation Torch, firing one working turret before heavy shells and bombs struck her. A duel with the United States battleship Massachusetts and planes from the carrier Ranger left her battered in port. Amazon expeditions in the early 1900s often staged portraits with captured wildlife like tapirs to record size, coat, and teeth for museums. Teams carried glass plate cameras and measuring sticks, turning jungle finds into type records and range maps. Germany in the 1940s shows a civil defense fire unit drilling with gas masks and heavy hose nozzles during air raid practice. These teams trained for blackout fires, smoke, and possible gas alarms across cities, alongside wardens and first aid crews. April 1906, Vesuvius lifts a dark column above Naples only hours before its biggest 20th century eruption. Ash buried towns like Ottaviano and Boscotricase. Hundreds died. Engineers test a rescue capsule mounted under a Lockheed Lightning fighter in 1945, built to rush a single wounded flyer to safety. The pod replaced a drop tank, added a window and oxygen line, and briefly turned a fast interceptor into a one-seat air ambulance. Around 1900, London common lodging houses packed rows of bunks where tenants rented a bed for one night and sometimes by the shift, a practice nicknamed hot bedding. After liberation in 1945, mothers in a hospital barrack at Dachau hold their babies for a rare, calm moment. Opened in 1933, the camp later became a model for the system across Europe. October 1945 in Hiroshima, a scorched streetcar sits amid twisted steel about 2 kilometers from the blast center. One bomb leveled most of the city in seconds, and within a year, more than 100,000 lives were lost, forcing the world to rethink war and peace. 1906, San Francisco. A street splits along the San Andreas Fault after a 7.9 earthquake, with road layers lifted and torn. The rupture ran about 477 kilometers. Refugee families in late 1910s Europe stand on a near-empty street, their plain coats and headscarves matching scenes from Belgian mining towns. Such images ran in newspapers to raise food and shelter funds, turning quiet roads into proof of need. In the early 1930s, the Soviet Union shut or razed thousands of churches, yet a few new shells were still raised by local crews under state eyes. 1933 fell in the Great Famine, so this frame of arches and scaffolds reads like a quiet act of faith cast in concrete. Backstage in 1948, Zurich, a circus performer, rests beside a tuba case and a drumhead, shoes still laced for the ring. Post-war European circuses blended live bands with daring acts, selling bright nights while cities rebuilt. Morning of April 15, 1912, a Titanic lifeboat drifts among broken ice as the rescue ship Carpathia nears. The water was near -2 degrees Celsius, and 705 people were saved that day, while empty boats and wreckage traced the disaster's path. During the Manchurian outbreak of 1910 to 1911, doctors wore full bodysuits and a layered cloth mask design popularized by physician Wu Lien-te. Great Plains in 1935 shows eroded hills where wind stripped topsoil after years of drought and deep plowing that broke prairie roots. Dust storms carried soil across states, and new shelter belts and contour farming began soon after to save the land. Archival portraits from 1908 show the cat and the elm spirit in Konstantin Stanislavski's Moscow Art Theater, staging of Maurice Maeterlinck's The Bluebird. Bold masks and rough, symbolic costumes helped create a dream world that shaped modern stage magic. In 1910, Europe's first recorded passenger air crash turned a new flying show into a silent field of broken wood and wire. Early craft used spruce frames, linen skin, and open fuel runs, so even a rough landing could fold the structure and ignite in seconds. Budapest, 1984. Two blind parents walk with their child, each guiding with a white cane on a quiet street. The white cane, a global symbol since the 1930s, signals right-of-way and shows how skill and trust turn a city into open paths. In 1893, crowded yards like this helped germs spread as shared pumps and open drains mixed waste with water. After John Snow's map linked the illness to water in 1854, the city built sewers and new laws, but the poorest blocks lagged for years. A 1957 studio portrait captures a woman hugging her partner from behind, faces close, with soft light and a plain backdrop. Mid-century portrait makers favored large diffused lamps and medium-format film, which gave smooth skin tones. A Black Sea ship graveyard from the early 1920s shows storm-wrecked and scuttled hulls packed into a quiet cove after years of war and rough trade routes. Hazardous headlands and poor charts made this coast infamous, and salvagers later picked the iron bones for scrap. In 1960, scientists used a ring of tiny lights and a camera to map the eye's quick jumps, called saccades. These tests of reflex and illusion helped build modern eye-tracking tools used in phones, cars, and games. In 1933, a new hydro dam raised a reservoir that submerged an entire riverside village, leaving rooftops and porches visible above the water. Across that era, hundreds of settlements were relocated or lost for power and canals. Cuba ended legal slavery in 1886, yet in the 1890s, its sugar fields still used long-hour contract crews of Afro-Cuban workers for very low pay. By 1894, the island led world sugar exports. In 1888, Manchester, a city river so loaded with factory waste that its surface ignited, sent tall flames into the fog. The shock of water on fire fueled early public health campaigns and stricter rules on industrial discharge. Berlin, 1918. Young veterans sit in a recovery ward, faces steady after months at the front. Here, doctors tested early rehabilitation and simple prosthetic gear, a quiet beginning of modern trauma care. Panopticon-style prison. Rings of cells face a single watchtower so one guard can see all. The design makes inmates feel watched at every moment, a living symbol of modern surveillance discussed by Michel Foucault. An heir bows to his father in a Persian court, pressing his forehead to the shoe as a formal sign of respect. This royal ritual shows how power and family blended and how quickly such customs faded in the 20th century. This toppled machine lies on the floor of a New York textile mill in the year 1911. A rare look at how early factories lacked basic safety. Images like this helped push new safety laws that changed work across the United States. Men in hats sit around a long table at a Romanian wedding in the 1930s, a time when village feasts often lasted many hours with formal toasts and rows of bottles. The stern faces and close circle hint at a private ritual of honor and community, caught in a quiet pause. Indian workers carry heavy bales between rail cars under a contract labor system across the British Empire in the year 1885. Growing public concern over its harsh terms helped end the practice in the early 20th century, leaving deep family trails across oceans. Jewish families wait by a crowded bus in the year 1938, holding bags and papers for a long journey to Palestine. Their move from Europe, soon followed by war, helped shape later lives and the future of the region. Women stand in a yard of wooden barracks in the city, then called Petrograd in the year 1923, as a serious lung disease spread through poor districts. Crowded rooms, weak food, hard work, and little fresh air let infection travel fast. A crowd in the United States during the 1960s holds signs reading "Long hair is communism" and "Stop hippies," showing a clash over style and values. Hair became a public symbol in a culture shift, turning a simple haircut into a headline. Rows of wooden huts line a mining camp by Diamond Fields in the year 1925, built fast with tin roofs and bare floors. Such company housing kept workers close to the pits, while comforts and profits gathered elsewhere. Workers spread across the sand at low tide in Cancale, the oyster capital of France by the Bay of Mont Saint-Michel. The very high tides expose the beds twice a day, and growers raise oysters by hand for up to 3 years, prized for a bright mineral taste. Rows of simple crosses fill a field in California in the year 1912, a resting place for farm laborers and travelers. The plain markers show how hard life and weak records could erase names, leaving a quiet sea of memory. Empress Wanrong, wife of the last Emperor Puyi, sits in rich silk and a jeweled crown in the 1920s. Her life marked the closing of the Qing court as China moved from empire toward a new era. An aerial view shows wide, clear-cut patches in a once dense forest, with curved edges and small islands of trees left standing. In the late 1950s, new roads, chainsaws, and pulp demand sped up logging worldwide, showing how fast a century of growth can vanish. A rider pushes a bicycle fitted with a tiny house, a handmade shelter from snow and wind in the 1920s. Early bike caravans appeared in Europe when clever makers turned bicycles into small moving homes for cold weather. 3 men use hand-powered tools to do careful dental work outdoors, while the patient rests on a padded board. Traveling dentists served villages before electric clinics, relying on calm hands and precise breath control for each step. London firefighters train on Eva Riley's rescue table in the year 1936, a device made to help people breathe again after smoke or water accidents. The pivoting frame rocks the body to trigger natural breathing, an early step toward modern first aid. Floors crumpled into a V-shape after an apartment collapse in New York City in the year 1923. The scene shows why cities tightened building codes, as weak upkeep can turn small faults into major danger. Crates marked vodka fill a New York warehouse in the year 1933, the first shipment from Russia after the end of Prohibition. The tall stacks announce a new market as city bars hurry to stock shelves and nights change. An early automatic gun from the year 1889 uses recoil to load and fire again, a breakthrough by inventor Hiram Maxim. Its fast, steady fire reshaped battle tactics and pushed armies toward trenches in the century that followed. Inside the private rail car of Nicholas II, the padded walls, sofa, desk, and lamps turn a small cabin into a quiet study on wheels. Royal trains were rolling palaces that let the court cross vast Russia in comfort and secrecy. Rows of empty shelves frame piles of charred books, the quiet end of a great library after conflict and fire. Across history, armies often struck libraries first because a book can hold a people's memory. Japanese officers with swords meet British troops for wartime talks in Asia in the year 1945. The quiet standoff of blades and carbines shows a meeting where image and honor mattered as much as terms. A forest of poles and wires hangs over New York City in the year 1923, when power lines and telephone cables raced ahead of tidy planning. The messy loops mark a young network joining homes and offices, early proof that cities run on hidden threads. A rescue team guides a downed pilot to a helicopter at night in Vietnam, his eyes still locked on the moment. Moments earlier, he watched another plane strike a ridge, a near miss that turned survival into a quiet shock. A suffragette in London in the year 1914 faces the camera after a street clash, hat pinned in place and dark streaks on her cheeks. Her steady look tells how the fight for the vote demanded courage and how resolve can outlast fear. Two photos from a meeting between Leonid Brezhnev and West German Chancellor Willy Brandt show the same table twice, the original with bottles and ashtrays and the published version with them removed. This neat comparison reveals how editors cleaned images to shape a tidy public image in the 1970s. Workers stand beside a line of Model T cars in the year 1913 when Henry Ford turned moving assembly into a system of timed steps. This idea cut build time from many hours to about 90 minutes and made a car most families could afford. Elvis Presley sits in an Elva Mark VI during filming for Viva Las Vegas in the early 1960s. The movie made fast cars and desert roads a pop dream, boosting sports car fever across America. Doctors in a small Chinese clinic in the year 1952 treat a farmer with careful hands in a plain room. Early programs sent medical teams to villages and trained barefoot doctors, bringing basic care to places that had never had it before. Soviet and American sailors share a drink on deck in 1945, days after the war in the Pacific ended. For a brief moment, the coming Cold War felt far away, and this photo holds a rare circle of smiles and medals. A family sits in a home fallout shelter in the year 1955, shelves packed with canned food, water, and first aid. Civil defense guides taught households to prepare basements like this during the Cold War, turning storage rooms into practice spaces for safety. 3 men in India pose with a cobra and baskets in the year 1880, part of street shows once common across the subcontinent. These performers mixed music, careful handling, and local knowledge of wildlife, a craft later limited to protect animals and their homes. A city block lies in ruins after heavy bombing during the Second World War, with only bare walls left standing. The empty grid shows how fire and shock waves can erase streets in hours, leaving a silent map of loss. A young actress shakes paws with a famous collie on a studio desk in Los Angeles in the year 1943, during filming of a hit movie about a brave dog. The role made her a rising star and turned the collie into a worldwide icon. A crowd watches a bright fire as stacks of files burn in the spring of 1945, a last-minute purge as defeat neared. The blaze shows how people try to erase the record, but history keeps traces in witnesses, archives, and images. A German rider carries his bicycle across a cold stream in Norway in the year 1940. The light gear on the frame shows how fast troops could move over rough ground in the north. A woman tries a home breathing device with hose and mask during the flu pandemic in the year 1919. Many such gadgets promised clean air more than proven protection, showing how people look to new science at home. Volunteers haul a wooden crate up a steep alpine slope in Switzerland in the year 1954, carrying an ibex back to its mountain home. Early rewilding efforts like this helped rebuild herds across high valleys and bring the species back. On a Hollywood backlot in the 1920s, a small crew frames a scene with a hand-cranked camera and a striped umbrella. Early movie makers turned plain courtyards into worlds, showing how imagination can build cinema when the director calls action. The broken mast of the United States ship Maine stands over Havana Harbor in the year 1899, months after the blast that sank her. The loss helped push the United States into war with Spain, reshaping power in the Caribbean and the Pacific. American troops stand in rain capes on a jungle path in the Philippines in the year 1899. This early campaign after the Spanish-American War tested new tactics in tropical heat and heavy rain. British soldiers crowd around fresh newspapers on a dock in the year 1900 during the Second Boer War. They scan reports before sailing, a brief pause that shows how news shaped morale far from the front. In 1901, Andrew Carnegie hosts a grand dinner where the table is shaped like a cross-section of a rail, a nod to the steel that built his fortune. Soon after, he sold his steel company and turned to giving, funding thousands of libraries and schools. Captain Lawrence Oates stands with ponies and sled dogs aboard the ship Terra Nova during the British South Pole expedition around 1910. Weeks after arriving second at the pole, Oates gave his life on the return in 1912 to help his team, a quiet act long remembered. A woman bends to look through a narrow gap in the Berlin Wall, searching for a view of the other side. This small act shows how a line of concrete could split daily life, turning tiny cracks into windows of hope. Dorothea Lange sits on her field car in California in the year 1936, ready to chase the hard stories of the Great Depression. She later photographed the removal of Japanese-American families, images the government kept from the public for more than 50 years. A mother and her children wait with bags in California in the year 1942, photographed by Dorothea Lange for the War Relocation Authority. Her pictures show how more than 110,000 Japanese Americans were sent to inland camps, and they keep the family's quiet strength. A girl reads the Washington Post on July 21, 1969, with the headline, "The Eagle has landed, and 2 men walk on the moon." That night, Apollo 11 ended the space race as Neil Armstrong took the first steps, turning a quiet living room into world history. Sunbathers stretch out on the broken stones of Sevastopol, turning a ruined shore into a summer beach after the war. The scene shows how people rebuild spirit first, using light and laughter to claim a future from shattered walls. Survivors pour through the Iron Arch as the gates open on January 27, 1945. In a breath of winter light, a place of fear becomes a path home. Families sleep shoulder to shoulder in a London shelter in the year 1940, turning a stone floor into a bedroom. During the air raids, miles of underground refuges kept people safe while the city breathed and waited for morning. Women with wicker baskets wait in a food line outside a Moscow shop in 1931 during a period of rationing and shortages. Their layered clothes and patient stances show daily routines shaped by scarcity and centralized distribution. An early reading machine turns printed letters into musical tones as a woman learns to hear text, a breakthrough for blind readers. Built in the 1930s, it translated light and shadow into sound to open books and exhibits to everyone. A librarian gives an old book a careful vaccine against bookworms, using a fine needle to treat the binding. Early conservators used methods like this to stop tiny larvae that eat paper and leather, so the pages could live for another century. A strong wind tipped the 213-meter Navy airship Los Angeles into a near-vertical pose atop a 60-meter mooring mast at Lakehurst, New Jersey in the year 1926. It settled back without harm, leaving one of the most unforgettable images in early air travel. A builder stands on the north leg of the rising Gateway Arch in St. Louis in the year 1965, 183 meters above the ground. The stainless steel monument reaches 192 meters in a perfect catenary curve, built from hollow triangular pieces set with near-millimeter precision. An experimental Soviet night vision set lets a tank driver see by invisible light, using infrared lamps and special goggles. Nicknamed Dudka, it was tested in the year 1939 on fast tanks as an early step toward modern night driving systems. Inside Peterson House, this is the small bed where President Abraham Lincoln spent his final hours in the year 1865, photographed moments after he was carried away. He was brought here from Ford's Theater across the street, and the bed was so short that he lay diagonally to rest. Members of a secret campus society pose with spears and star-marked caps at the University of Illinois, a ritual group that guarded traditions and staged night events. Their names stayed hidden for years, yet records show such clubs shaped student life and campus lore into the early 20th century. Moscow porters line up at Belaruski Station in the year 1974, each in a white apron waiting to carry heavy trunks for fixed fees. Rules of the time favored male crews for this hard work, and their numbers were listed on tags so passengers could rate service. A young woman named Alice Ulpian stands with a simple sash, crowned a beauty queen in France in the year 1921. Early contests prized natural look and calm posture, and winners toured quiet salons instead of bright stages. Early field dentistry. A village team removes a tooth outside a wooden clinic with hand tools and steady hands. In the early 20th century, many towns used barbers or army medics for tooth care, with a bench and a bottle in place of a full office. In the year 1920, an Istanbul porter hauls a stack of wooden chairs on his back like a walking lounge for the street. He rents quick rests for 10 cents each, turning Waited into a smart city business. Dina, a German shepherd from the Soviet Union, worked as a trained service dog with 3 roles during the years 1941 to 1945. She carried gear, guided crews across hard zones, and delivered messages with calm focus when people needed help. In the year 1946, Berliners planted small gardens beside the damaged Reichstag, turning broken ground into rows of potatoes and cabbage. These tiny plots fed families through the hard months when shops were empty and transport was slow. In the year 1940, London families crowded into underground shelters and played records to steady their nerves during nightly air raids. At the height of the Blitz, more than 1 million people slept in the tube, turning platforms into short-lived streets of blankets and tea. A worker takes down a white men sign after a federal court order in the United States in the year 1964. That year, the Civil Rights Act and court rulings began removing many separate signs across public places, a clear step toward equal access. In the year 1933, news photographers stage a dramatic reenactment of an incident for a newspaper with actors caught in mid-action. Before television, many papers built posed scenes and composite photos to give readers a sense of motion and place. Patients practiced gym exercises at Sint Willibrordus Mental Health Clinic in the Netherlands, photographed by Henk Blanziar on 14 February 1956. Movement therapy was used to steady the mind and rebuild routine, showing a shift in care at the time. Paper falls like snow as crowds celebrate the first humans to walk on the moon in the year 1969. Chicago and New York held giant ticker tape parades for Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, filling the streets with about 2,400 tons of paper. A lone traffic officer stands by barbed wire on the wet road to the Brandenburg Gate in the year 1953. The silent street shows the tense split of Berlin years before the wall rose in 1961. During an unemployment march in London in the year 1930, protesters and officers pull in a tense tug-of-war over a banner. The scene shows the strain of the hard years between the wars, when rallies called for work and relief. Vogue pictured the man of the future in the year 1939, wearing a flight-style suit with chain-like panels and a ringed halo-like headpiece. Years before the space age, this look guessed at utility fashion and wearable tech that later shaped astronaut gear and street style. Audi's first car, the Type A, rolled out in Germany in the year 1910 with a 4-cylinder engine and sturdy ladder frame. The brand name Audi is a Latin echo of founder August Horch's surname, meaning listen. In Moscow in the year 1978, a choir of young men practices rock and roll inside a correction colony with big notes drawn on the board. Music classes were used to build skill and order, and some groups later played at public events. Stalingrad, winter of 1943. In the rubble, a frozen soldier lifts his hands as Red Army men move in. The battle ended on the 2nd of February with about 91,000 prisoners after months of bitter cold and street combat. On the Kursk front in the year 1943, a signalman wades across a river with a reel of wire to restore a field phone line. More than half of wartime messages traveled on such cables, and crews often laid them through water to keep command talking. In 1963, a radio operator works in a swimsuit beside racks of glowing tube radios that turn the room into a hotbox. Vacuum tube transmitters wasted much power as heat, so crews used fans or lighter clothing to keep signals moving. Officers scale a brick facade to reach a woman on a narrow ledge in the year 1942, while a woven catch net is stretched below. Cities then used portable nets and window rescues, later replaced by inflatable cushions and trained crisis teams. An early motor ambulance from the First World War shows how engines replaced horse carts and cut rescue time by miles. The Red Cross fitted stretchers and basic care inside, turning roads into fast lifelines for wounded troops and civilians. An Egyptian Il-28 bomber flies low over the Sinai Desert during the War of Attrition between the years 1967 and 1970. This twin-engine jet was a Soviet design that could carry about 3 tons of load across roughly 2,000 kilometers. Paris turned the Champs-Élysées into a field for the Great Harvest on 21 June 1890, with hay cut beneath the Arc de Triomphe. The city held a one-day show of farm work to celebrate the season and bring country life to the crowd. Georgy Dobrovolsky works inside Soyuz 11 in 1971 during the first crewed visit to a space station. Days later, a small valve opened on return and the cabin lost pressure, ending the mission in silence. In 1877, crews spun miles of steel wire into the 4 great cables of the future Brooklyn Bridge. Guided by Emily Warren Roebling after her husband fell ill, the span opened in 1883 as the longest suspension bridge in the world. A doctor in the year 1884 uses a portable galvanic machine to test how a patient's nerves and muscles react to tiny currents. These early trials paved the way for modern electromyography and safe clinic tests of reflex and strength. A girl leans from a window of a log and earth cabin, its shutter patched with newspaper, in the United States during the 1930s. Federal photographers recorded rural poverty and sharecropper life so the nation could see how hard the Depression hit many families. In the year 1910 in Pitt County, North Carolina, jailed men sit in rolling cages, while guards and hounds stand watch for a mobile roadwork camp. Harsh vagrancy laws fed convict leasing that gave towns no-pay crews for many years. In the year 1931, members of the Bulu people in Cameroon heard of hardship in the United States and chose to help. They sent $3.77 through missionaries to New York, a small gift that became a worldwide story of kindness. Edward Melnikov rides his one-wheel intracycle in 1976, sitting inside the ring as it rolls over snow. The homemade machine used a small engine and counterweights to reach about 60 kilometers per hour. In 1963, Valentina Tereshkova tests space food from a tube while strapped into a training capsule, preparing for long hours in a suit. Early menus used pureed meals in squeezable packs so cosmonauts could eat without crumbs or spills. Abebe Bikila of Ethiopia runs barefoot along the old Marathon Road on 7 May 1960, passing the graves of the ancient warriors. He wins in 2 hours, 23 minutes, 44.6 seconds, a quiet preview of his Olympic gold later that year. Jane Russell reclines in straw for a George Hurrell publicity, still for the Howard Hughes film The Outlaw, shot in 1940. The studio used bold lighting and a prop pistol to craft an image so talked about that it helped make her a star. Circus elephants marched through New York in the year 1952 on their way to Madison Square Garden, a yearly sight called the Elephant Walk. The city paused as the gentle giants passed shop signs and taxis, a parade that ended when animals left big shows. A steam road roller from Colomna Machine Works, built around the years 1910 to 1912, packs earth with tons of hot iron and steady chuffs. Machines like this shaped early highways across the Russian Empire before petrol engines took over. Traveling performers gather near Samarkand in the 1890s, wearing loose robes and tall paper hats for comic street shows. Many Central Asian troops mixed music, acrobatics, and fair tricks along the Silk Road, turning markets into small carnivals. A community party in Virginia in the year 1958 seats white and black students at the same table, name tags pinned like small flags of welcome. 4 years after the Supreme Court ruling on schools, moments like this showed the slow first steps of integration. On the left, a T-34 and foot soldiers move across a frozen steppe, marking the winter turn of the Second World War. On the right, brick by brick, workers rebuild a ruined house once the fire stops, proof that repair can move faster than ruin. Karachi, 1897. Scientist Waldemar Haffkine walks into a crowded lane to start the first vaccine campaign against the plague. His field teams immunized thousands in days, showing that organized public health beat the costly plan to tear down homes. Victorian sisters with floor-length hair turned it into a stage act and a thriving hair care business. Some locks reached over 1.5 meters, and their tours made long hair the dream look of the age. A propeller sled called an Aerosani skims across the snow in Karelia in the year 1944, riding 4 skis with a small aircraft engine. Scouts, medics, and mail move this way at up to 60 kilometers per hour over frozen lakes and forest trails. Workers raise a tall timber pile frame for the water-deflecting wall of the Chaglinka Bridge in the year 1912. Such walls guard piers from spring ice and flood force, driven in place by a steam hoist and hand winches. A towering mannequin leg marked Sanderson Hosiery in Los Angeles in the year 1949, built so drivers could spot it from blocks away. After the war, giant roadside signs and 3-dimensional figures spread across America as nylon stockings returned to stores. In Belfast, workers raised the giant liner Titanic under 70-meter-tall aerial gantries, driving about 3 million rivets by hand. Her keel was set in the year 1909, and she slid into the water on the 31st of May, 1911. In 1965, scientists tested negative pressure birth suits that let mothers turn a valve to lower the pressure around the belly. The idea promised easier labor and even smarter babies, but trials were brief and the device soon disappeared. Children try red and blue glasses while reading 3-dimension comics in the year 1953. The first hit from St. John Publishing sparked a short 3-dimensional craze, with the debut issue selling over 1 million copies. Grand Central in the year 1940 turns into a giant dorm as troops and travelers sleep on the marble steps between late trains. Wartime schedules and blackout drills packed the station so tightly that benches vanished and the floor became the bed. An Australian police mugshot from 1924 pairs a piercing close-up with a full-length pose beside a plain chair, chalk notes hovering above the suspect's head. Early forensic teams in Sydney framed clothing, posture, and features this way for detectives long before digital files, images that still hum with wary energy. Sergeant Stubby, a stray who became a United States Army hero in World War I, wore a jacket filled with medals after months at the front. He warned his unit of danger, found the hurt on the field, survived 17 battles, and later passed in 1926. A classroom rolls on rails in Ontario in the year 1932, part of a school car that brought teachers to far towns each month. Children learned reading, maps, and science inside a wooden coach before the engine pulled away to the next stop. Red commanders pose in winter 1918, wrapped in felt boots, fur hats, and mix-and-match gear from home and captured stores. The tall man wears a long peasant overcoat cut like a caftan with a chest pocket, common stopgap clothing before regular uniforms arrived. During World War II, the National Gallery's rooms stood bare because its masterpieces were moved far from bombs, deep inside a slate quarry in Wales. Empty frames marked the ghosts of Rembrandt and Turner, while a hidden store kept the art safe with careful climate control. A 1920s Fresno County scene shows a bold roadside sign asking drivers to police themselves, with a 30 miles per hour limit and no speed officers in sight. A group poses by a racing-style car beneath it, a dusty snapshot of when honor was the traffic law. Police hold back a surge of Beatles fans outside 505 during peak Beatlemania in the mid-1960s. Handmade signs sway over the packed crowd as wooden barriers strain, a single frame of pop culture fever. A village woman tends a rough moonshine still, an iron drum over a fire with a bent pipe into a wooden cooling trough, somewhere in wartime Kursk, 1943. Improvised spirits served as barter and morale on the home front, a quiet act of survival under occupation. A matron in a licensed Paris maison close checks a worker's corset fit during a city-supervised inspection circa 1930 to 1932. Photographer Gyula Halash, Brasai, captured how brothels operated under municipal control with strict rules and hygiene checks. Tehran, 1979. Women volunteers guard a central square during the revolution, standing in black chadors with issued equipment. Their steady posture hints at tension and resolve as crowds churn just off frame. Australia, 1980s. Beach crowd watches a swimsuit contest as contestants line up under bright sun. A pensive girl at the edge adds a quiet counterpoint, turning a lively pageant into a small human story. Persian harem wives of Nasir al-Din Shah Qajar, 1870s. The Qajar court embraced early photography, and thick brows, faint mustaches, and layered silks reflect that era's beauty ideal. Marceline Bertrand in the 1970s. Agency test shots that bottle the soft focus, bohemian look of the decade. An actress and model, she later used her platform to support Native American arts and women's health causes while raising two future filmmakers, Angelina Jolie and James Haven. Auto Polo, 1910. Drivers used open cars to chase a giant ball like riders with mallets. The spectacle wowed crowds and doubled as a test of steering and strength for new machines. The fad faded by the 1920s after costly repairs, but scenes like this still feel like a wild dream on wheels. A rescued U-boat sailor stares in shock and relief on the deck of the Canadian frigate Swansea, 1944. The ship ranked among the Atlantic's most effective sub-hunters that year, saving lives while tightening Allied control of the sea. United States, 1925. A sheriff oversees barrels of seized liquor poured into a drain during Prohibition. The nationwide ban, created by the 18th Amendment and the Volstead Act, fueled hidden bars and smuggling until the 21st Amendment ended it in 1933. Beijing, 1903. Wealthy merchants dine while hired performers play pipa and two-string fiddles, turning the meal into a private show. Their silk robes carry the Shu longevity symbol, an elite fashion snapshot taken just years before the Qing dynasty fell. Caisson work in the South Urals, late 19th century. Crews rivet a giant iron chamber that will be sunk for a deep foundation, with air pumped inside to keep water out. Teams rose in stages after each shift to avoid pressure sickness, a hard method that made the region's big river bridges possible. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow sit by their ford in the early 1930s, a calm frame from a story that raced across America. Their run ended on May 23, 1934, near Gibbsland, Louisiana, when 6 officers led by Frank Hamer stopped the car in an ambush, firing more than 100 rounds. Rex Theater, a segregated cinema in the United States, 1937. Venues like this served black audiences under Jim Crow rules. The marquee even advertises a Tarzan feature. Court decisions in the late 1950s and 1960s ended this system. Coal miners celebrate a record in 1960. 108 yards driven in 4.5 days. Sooted faces and headlamps tell of a low seam and relentless shifts underground. The chalkboard is their trophy, a quick snapshot of speed and teamwork. New York, 1964. A teacher faces rows of empty desks after a court move to integrate the local school. Many white families kept their children home, showing how policy changed faster than daily habits. St. Kilda, 1920s. Island men line a stone lane on one of Europe's most remote edges. For centuries, they lived on seabirds and sea cliffs, but storms, illness, and a shrinking community led to a full evacuation in 1930. The Ross sisters, Aggie, Maggie, and Vicky, were teenage contortionists who stunned Hollywood with their solid potato salad routine in 1944. Trained on state fair stages, they stacked, bridged, and folded into shapes so extreme that coaches still study the film as a benchmark of flexibility. Pre-revolution Iran, late 1960s. A women's magazine shows bright fashion, mini dresses, bold prints, and styled hair that matched global pop trends. Titles like Zane Ruse and Etalate Banovan turned style and culture into mainstream reading before 1979, a snapshot of a modern urban mood now frozen in time. Western Desert, 24 October 1940. A British ordnance man fits a nose fuse to a 250-pound bomb before a strike on Italian positions. Open-air bomb parks like this let Royal Air Force crews reload fast and keep pressure on the desert front. Battlefield oddity. A German Panzer IV sits mangled against a tree after a low-flying American P-47 Thunderbolt struck it during a ground attack. The impact twisted armor like paper, leaving a surreal scene that shows how the sky could break a tank. Russian soldiers burned stacks of Chechen Naki banknotes in Grozny, January 1995. The planned currency was announced in 1994, but most notes were seized and destroyed before they could circulate. Snowbound trams in Komsomolsk-on-Amur, 1960. Far East winters here often fell below -30 Celsius, piling drifts so deep entire streetcars vanished, and crews spent days digging the lines open by hand. The city's tramway had opened only in 1956, and this storm pushed it to the limit. Moscow's early share taxi, late 1940s. A truck with benches in the cargo bed carried workers across a city still rebuilding. These routes filled gaps between tram and bus lines, paid per seat, and ran in any weather. Steel body, open back, and icy wind made the ride short and unforgettable. Cantho, 1965. Life ran on water. Families traded from boats that doubled as homes, shaded by the timeless conical hat. The Mekong Delta's floating markets moved rice, fish, and tools along river highways, feeding much of South Vietnam's table. Even in a tense year, the docks kept buzzing from dawn to dusk.